The job market is failing Gen Z, but the Fed doesn't believe there's full-on alarm bells ringing yet. This week, initial jobless claims went down, showing the labor market is still solid in the Fed's eyes. But if you head over to Reddit and elsewhere on the internet, people are telling an entirely different story. I'm going to explain why Gen Z is struggling to get a job. 3 things you can do if you're looking to find a job, and take apart the government's view on the labor market versus what people like you and me are saying. Now, I'm John, a CPA with 10 years in international finance experience. I can confidently say the job market looks bleak. This past Wednesday, Jerome Powell and the Fed cut the federal funds rate by 25 basis points, but said there is, quote, no risk-free path in the Fed's decisions. Many people speculate we haven't even seen the full brunt of the tariffs play into effect this year. Now, there seems to be some confusion by people in the realtor community. They automatically think cutting the federal funds rate will reduce the rate on the mortgages. And historically it has, but mortgage rates moved up 9 basis points after the rate cut. So if we look at Brandon Mundy on X, he says, happy Friday, everyone. With interest rates dropping, now might be the perfect time to jump off the fence and get ahead of the curve. Remember, the interest on rent is 100%. Don't pay your landlord's mortgage, pay your own. Has he not seen the long-term rates increase? I want to explain exactly why this is happening. The Fed policies generally control the short-term and not the long-term end of the yield curve. The 10 and 30-year yields are set by the market, reflecting expectations for growth, inflation, fiscal risk, and Fed credibility. The market is not fully buying the Fed's narrative about inflation returning back to 2%. If we look back to May in this year, Moody's downgraded the U.S. sovereign debt rating from a AAA to a AA1, citing high debt levels of the U.S. and inability of politicians to address the fiscal issues. It's so easy to find misinformed realtors believing the rate cut's going to help mortgage rates, and that's just the beginning of the story. Gen Zers are hurting so bad in the housing market right now, with much of the housing market out of reach, that it makes much more sense to talk about the job market. Now, if we look at the most recent JOLTS report, it begins to tell the story. The job openings total non-farm shows all the jobs not filled on the last business day of the month. We've been downtrending all the way since post-COVID with no end in sight. You could argue that when I came out of college in 2015, the job market was worse, with just over 5 million openings. We're now seeing a level of 7 million openings. Basically, that's implying that there's more jobs on the market. That said, it doesn't seem like the bottom is in sight. We're just at the beginning stages where AI is admittedly taking these lower level roles. I'd even argue that it's harder to find an entry-level job position today versus back in 2015 due to the changing landscape of AI in the workforce. I remember I was struggling to find a job after a 4-year accounting degree back then, which paid $50,000. At the time, I was reading about people who came out of college before me and made more money, but I was just happy to get my foot in the door. Now, with inflation, you'd roughly need to make $68,000 coming out of college to have the same salary. If there's one thing that doesn't seem to keep up with the housing market, honestly, it's the wages. Fortune put out an article the other day titled Jerome Powell on Signs of AI Bubble and an Economy Leaning Too Hard on the Rich. Unusually large amounts of economic activity. So let's look at some of the comments of how people are actually feeling. Patrick says, stagnant wages plus increasing prices doesn't make for a strong economy. Social goes on to say, so depending on the wealthy, ironically, people without wealth do a great deal of work but take home a very small portion of the economy. Watch and see what happens in the next 12 months. It's clear that many people are losing confidence in the Fed and voicing their frustration. Social is basically implying spending will decrease with the drop in the workforce and inflation at play. Digging deeper into the jobs numbers, the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows the unemployment rate ticking up in the professional and business sector from 3.3% in July to 4.2% in August. It's clearly showing jobs are harder to find, but it doesn't directly touch on Gen Z, which I'm convinced is struggling out there. Let me know in the comments what you think of this job market and give this video a like if you're enjoying it so far. Compared to 2015, the unemployment rate of professional and business sector was 5.2% back then. I think we're headed for those levels in the long term once AI kicks in at full force. We likely haven't seen the worst of the job market yet for Gen Z, so take this at full warning. I like to keep my eye on the pulse of the accounting industry via Reddit, and one post that struck me recently was, "I'm an accountant with 8 years of experience, now I can't get a job." Colton, a commenter, says, "Man, I don't know. I've been seriously looking for the last few months, and I too have 8 years of experience, 1 year gap, no CPA, and I've had maybe 5 interviews, 2 second round interviews, no offers. I honestly don't think I did poorly in the interviews. I got to the second round twice. It's just a really, really shitty market right now." Raven Malfinescent, who appears to be a staff accountant, agrees, saying, "I haven't been able to get a job either. It's rough out there. I just had a final interview this past Tuesday and I thought it went really well, only to receive a rejection email in less than 2 hours later. It was a gut punch and I feel devastated." I could go on, finding more posts and more people, but the narrative in the comments sections are that people are struggling. It hasn't been this apparent in a long time. And the government seems a bit disconnected from reality in my opinion, but they're looking at numbers that aren't backing up the sentiment in the labor force. The numbers that they see appear better. Now also keep in mind that I'm mainly focusing on professional jobs, but it's now like the overall job market isn't full of roses. If you're still with me, take a moment and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. So what can you do if you're a Gen Zer or anyone else looking for a job in this tough market? First, I'd say leverage your contacts. That was the way I got my first foot in the door at my first job back in the day. You want to circumvent throwing out tons of resumes on online job postings if possible, because you're probably aware and know that more and more job postings are becoming ghost job postings, which don't actually exist. Second, if you're a Gen Zer and have a parent with one of those prime properties near jobs, I personally wouldn't move out. And I know it sounds crazy to some and goes against what most younger people want, but a lot of these homes are near cities and that are near the jobs are owned by people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. If you can live at home a bit longer, save and be closer to the jobs, in reality, it's not that bad of a thing. Lastly, try a recruiter. I've had luck with this in the past, and for a lot of professional jobs from nursing to teaching and finance, you can find and leverage a recruiter. This plays into point one of making contacts, and I admit it can be harder for entry-level roles reaching out to recruiters, but they have a direct link to the hiring manager, and that can be the difference between landing a job or not. Now, do I think rate cuts are going to spark the job markets? Frankly, I don't with the introduction of AI. We're facing a time like never before in the job market. There isn't a bottom in sight for the number of job openings, which is still dropping. To all the Gen Zers out there and others looking for jobs, keep your head up, keep pushing, and I'm confident you'll land something soon. I'll see you in the next video.